Welcome to the Covered Bridges in New Hampshire podcast, where we discuss all things related to covered bridges in the Granite State. Here's your host, Kim Chandler.
Hello, Covered Bridge people, and welcome to the podcast. Today we're speaking with Donna Crane of the Wilton Heritage Commission and Kermit Williams, Chair of the Wilton Selectboard. Donna and Kermit discuss the history and significance of the old Russell Hill Road Bridge and the community's efforts to preserve this distinctive Wilton landmark. Here we go. In this episode, we'll learn about the old Russell Hill Road Bridge in Wilton. Built in 1937, this historic bridge is one of 3 box pony bridges remaining in New Hampshire and the only box pony town lattice truss bridge left in North America. The bridge was bypassed in 2003 and continued to carry pedestrian traffic until it was fully closed in 2022. Plans are underway to preserve this historic structure. Today we're speaking with Donna Crane of the Wilton Heritage Commission and Kermit Williams, Chair of the Wilton Selectboard. Donna moved to Wilton in 2008, drawn by the town's Waldorf schools. Since then, she has become deeply involved in the community. She joined the Wilton Heritage Commission in 2020 and serves as its secretary. She's also president of the Wilton Community Center and participates in several other local organizations. Professionally, Donna works with the Wilton-based nature publisher Earth, Sky, and Water and at the library at McDowell in Peterborough, the nation's oldest artist residency program. Kermit has been active in public service in southern New Hampshire for more than a decade. He represented the towns of Francistown, Greenville, Lyndeborough, and Wilton in the New Hampshire House of Representatives from 2012 to 2020. In Wilton, he has served 4 terms on the Select Board and currently serves as its chair. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in computer engineering from Union College and spent many years working in the field before focusing more fully on public service. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Kim.
Hi.
Let's spend a few minutes talking about the history of the old Russell Hill Road Bridge, which is one of the names that the bridge has had over the years. And this location, which is just off of Route 101 in Wilton, has been the site of a bridge since the mid-1700s. And the original bridge was referred to as Livermore Bridge after a mill that was constructed by Wilton's first minister, Reverend Jonathan Livermore. What was the history of that mill, and what do we know about Reverend Livermore?
Reverend Livermore, he actually wasn't the first minister. He was the first settled pastor.
Okay.
He came in the mid-1700s, and he one of the things that they did back in those days is that they would give the minister, instead of maybe paying them very much, they would give them land.
Okay.
And so he got 240 acres, a lot of which had trees on it. And so he decided he would build a sawmill. So the mill that he built on Bloodbrook was a sawmill, and he was cutting the trees from his own land. I assume he may have cut other people's trees up too, but he had sort of an uneven relationship with his parish, and he didn't last very long there.
Okay.
I think in the 1770s he left the parish, but I believe he kept the 240 acres and the sawmill. And the mill was actually there for a long time.
Okay.
Until I think the 1900s.
Okay.
Now, whether it was always a sawmill or whether it was some other kind of mill, because it got to be a point where sawmills didn't make a whole lot of sense as a water-driven. People use steam and then other types of energy to cut up their wood was more efficient.
So I would also say the fact that there is a dam on the site, a dam that is part of that entire thing, the mill, the dam, the bridge. So they're all sort of a parcel which makes it, I think, more significant as a location than just a bridge.
And that dam was part of the mill, of course.
Yes.
That's how the mill
Right.
builds up its power.
Right. The bridge that's there now is probably the third bridge that was built on that spot. And town records indicate that the second bridge was also a box pony bridge, which is the bridge that we have now. And that was built in 1860. And can we talk about what a box pony bridge is? Do either of you want to take that question or do you want me to take it?
Kim, why don't you take that one?
A box pony bridge were those types of bridges were actually very common, and they are um, a bridge in which the trusses extend above the roadbed but have no upper lateral bracing. So wooden pony truss bridges were actually really common for short spans during the 19th century as they were easy to construct and they were relatively cheap. And the Boston and Maine Railroad especially used those types of bridges. And because the pony trusses were housed or they were boxed in to protect the truss, so we end up calling them box pony bridges. And what's really unique about your bridge is there are 7 left in North America, and New Hampshire has 3, and that's one of them. So it's a very special um, type of covered bridge. It is an authentic covered bridge because the trusses are covered.
But there is no top. People don't know it's a covered bridge. So
Right. Right. And I know a lot of people when I mention that bridge is there and I say it's an authentic covered bridge, it's a box pony covered bridge, they stop and they think, "Oh, I've driven by that bridge." So they don't think that it's an historic bridge.
You know, a lot of people don't realize that covered bridges were covered to protect the timbers and not, to let people get out of the snow
Right.
or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's my theory, and I certainly don't have proof for it. But the guy who built the bridge in the 1930s was really a home builder and not a bridge builder.
Okay.
So I would expect that what he did was um, copy the bridge that was there. And obviously the wood had deteriorated over the years, and so it needed to be replaced. But um, rather than him being a kind of a pony bridge expert, it's much more likely that he uh, looked at what was there and duplicated as well as he could.
when the engineer came out to visit the site with us, Kermit, when you and I were there, he thought that some of it some of it had been duplicated, and he said some of it may have been original to the 19th century bridge that was just still in good shape, and he just kept it in there and reused it.
And that makes sense because again, I don't that the lattice type of bridge was patented, but I think there were probably bridge experts who knew how to build that. But this guy was a home builder,
Mhm.
and Marjorie Moores hired him to repair it, um, and she didn't necessarily go out looking for somebody who could build pony bridges, but somebody who was nearby who was a
Right.
carpenter.
And that gentleman's name was Fred Tuttle, and the records
Mhm.
show that he was paid $3,502.16 to build the bridge.
Some of that went to someone named Nihi
Yes.
Pajanin.
Mhm.
Um, but Fred Tuttle got the
Right.
bulk of the money. So my assumption is he was the expert and Pajanin was
His
his
assistant.
assistant.
Do we know
Right.
anything about either of those men? Are there any records for
Well,
them?
I did do a little reading, and I did talk to some of the people here in town, and apparently, Mr. Tuttle was a World War I vet, and he was a member of a family of carpenters. His brothers were carpenters, his kids, some of them were carpenters, and there are still Tuttles here in Wilton today. But as you said, he has no knowledge. They have no knowledge or records of him building other bridges. He was primarily a residential home builder. And when he passed away, his records were not kept, so there is no evidence that he ever did build any other bridges besides this one.
And Mr. Paginen, his daughter lived in Wilton up until within the last year. She lives in Greenfield now.
Okay.
Um, but Paginens lived in Wilton for a long time.
So that there were Tuttles actually interviewed there was a report from the National Society of Bridge Engineers who did a report on this bridge, and they had a historian who interviewed of engineers. They had someone who interviewed members of the family, including multiple Tuttles and such. So that was in I think that was in the 90s maybe. So there was interest in the bridge.
One story I really love is that, and I don't know why the town wasn't going to pay for the bridge to be rebuilt after the flood, or if Mrs. Moore's just wanted to donate, but I know that Marjorie Moore's did donate the funds for the bridge. What do we know about her, about Mrs. Moore's?
Well, Marjorie Morris was in the 1930s was probably the richest person in Wilton. She had a huge, beautiful house in Wilton Center that's still there. And she owned quite a bit of land besides that. And she was a widow. And her husband had been an entrepreneur and a fairly successful businessman in Boston. And they originally saw Wilton as a place for summer. Um, a lot of people in once the train started coming to Wilton, a lot of wealthy people in closer into Boston or other um, metropolitan areas, including New York City, saw Wilton as a place to go to kind of get out of the heat and the more uncomfortable part of the year. And Wilton also was a place, like a lot of New Hampshire, where people left after the Civil War and went west. People who were farmers. uh, New Hampshire's crop, universal crop is rocks. And so I think a lot of farmers saw New Hampshire as not the place that they would be successful, and so they went west to places like Ohio. The other thing, the interesting story about New Hampshire farmers is that somebody stole a bunch of merino wool sheep from the Spanish, and they raised those in New Hampshire because merino sheep succeed in cold weather. And so, in the time leading up to the Civil War, um, a lot of people started raising sheep. And if you go out in the woods in New Hampshire, you'll see stone walls, and they're there mainly to keep the sheep in. They didn't do a very good job keeping other animals in, but sheep didn't jump very high. And so everybody and their brother had a few sheep. But once the Civil War was over and cotton became very cheap, um, wool became less attractive for manufacturers, and so the sheep industry went away. And again, those farmers decided they had to go somewhere else. So if you go around in the woods in New Hampshire, Wilton is definitely an example of that. You will find abandoned farms, um, cellar holes, and
Right.
stone walls. And so these rich people were able to get land very
That-
inexpensively, because the farmers just walked away from the land and went out to Ohio or wherever to make a new farm. And so people like Mrs. Moore's were able to buy lots of land. I mean, I think her husband actually originally bought the land, but she owned all this land in Wilton. But I think she saw herself as not just a summer person, but also someone who wanted to contribute
Mhm.
to the town. And she did a lot of things, but she one of her investments um, was rebuilding this bridge. There's an article in the Wilton Journal from that era where, at the town meeting that was held right after the bridge was rebuilt, there was a round of applause for Mrs. Moores, for spending the money to rebuild the bridge, and obviously, part of that was probably people thinking, "Well, it didn't have to come out of our pocket."
And I would say, Kermit, it's also interesting, again, to talk about the full circle and looking at the story of this bridge, which I appreciate Kim asking us to talk about this because it required me to do some research, is the fact that currently one of the challenges facing the project is that there are multiple other demands on the town for tax dollars and for bridges and for other restoration projects, and currently there is no plan in Wilton for the town to maintain or restore this bridge. And so, for all of these questions, it just is interesting to know that in the case of Marjorie Standish Devlin Moores, that she came forward as an individual to focus on this. And I don't see that we have a knight in shining armor coming out of the sky to rescue this bridge the way she did. But I would say the idea that we can't look exclusively to the town as a maintenance to work on this bridge, and that we have to think outside of that and look at, certainly individuals, um, as well as other things. But she's an excellent example of how Wilton is still the same. They don't want to pay to fix the bridge. So there we are.
Right.
Yep, yep. I I wish there was a Marjorie Moores, uh, who, could reach into their pockets and pay to fix this bridge.
Mhm.
It's probably more than the $3,500 that she spent in
That is
1900.
correct, and
I'm
that will
sure.
come up, I'm
Sure
sure,
it is.
Kim, when we talk.
Yes, it will. One side note about Miss Moores that I found when I was researching her was that she was a dog lover, which I am also. And I read that
Yep,
her little dog could not make it up the stairs, so she built an elevator in her home for her dog. Do we know if that's true?
yep, it's true, and the elevator's
That's the
still there.
best. That's the best story ever.
Mhm.
I love it. I love it. So the Russell Hill Road Bridge carried traffic until it was bypassed in 2003, and there was a new road put in there to carry traffic, but you could still walk over the bridge, I think until 2022, and then it
Yes.
has been closed to pedestrians. Why was the bridge closed? Can you talk a little bit about what was going on with the bridge then?
In New Hampshire, every bridge that carries traffic, gets, checked by the DOT, and the DOT, uh, has this list that they call the red list, which are basically bridges that have, deficiencies, whether it's the supports for the bridge or whether it's the deck, uh, one way or another, they declare a bridge that, is starting to have problems, deficient, and, at some point, they will say the bridge is no longer usable for traffic. Um, this bridge was, I believe, declared deficient well before it was closed. And again, in a lot of cases, I mean, so, Donna was talking about the bridges that we have to pay for. We have, 3, 4 bridges now that are, considered, red listed bridges in Wilton. That well, one is closed to traffic right now, um, but the others are still open to traffic even though they are on the list to be
Okay.
repaired. And, I believe that what happened, and I don't couldn't find kinda detailed descriptions of the process, but I believe what happened is that between the state and, the town, they decided that rebuilding the Russell Hill Bridge was not a practical
Mhm.
project. So they built a new bridge across Blood Brook a little bit farther down the road. Um, the Russell Hill Road is a pretty rough road.
Mhm.
Uh, and so it wasn't really Yeah, I'm sure at one point it was a thoroughfare because otherwise the bridge wouldn't have
Right.
been there. But, as time went on and other places got paved roads, and the part of Russell Hill is road is paved, but not
Mhm.
all of it. And the part that isn't paved, these days is only seasonally maintained. And so I think they decided that it made more sense to have a crossing on Blood Brook a little
Mhm.
farther down, and the state helped pay for that
Right.
bridge.
Mhm. And I believe it there according to the records when this was happening, there was talk of actually, destroying the original bridge. Um, at least that's what I was seeing, and the people were, because they were gonna be putting in a new bridge, why would they need this one? But it was decided to keep it and just not, have it open uh, to traffic. So it was going to be just for horses and pedestrians and bicycles and things like that, and that, as you said, was till 2022 when I guess an inspection of the bridge revealed structural deficiencies that they did not want to send people across because I don't believe it had been without it being maintained by DOT or the town, it had been having issues. I did come across the last bridge inspection.
Yeah,
Yeah.
once it was closed, they
Yeah, the last bridge.
I was just gonna say once it was closed, nobody maintained
Correct.
it.
The last inspection, however, from the New Hampshire DOT is from July of '24. So they are still looking at it and keeping up with it, but they're not doing anything. And because we're not required by law as a closed bridge to do anything, nobody's doing anything, which is again why we're talking. Um, because obviously
Right.
that's that cannot go on indefinitely without only one end.
Yeah, so the DOT looks at every standing bridge in New Hampshire that once carried traffic, um, whether or not it still carries traffic or not. So they will look at this bridge again.
I think that this year it says bypassed historic is the way how they categorize it. Bypassed historic.
Yeah, there is a bridge that crosses the Sauhegan just a little bit down 101 from this bridge that's been bypassed since the 1950s, and they still inspect that bridge and give a report on
Mhm.
its status. One of the reasons is because there can be a risk to the river or the stream in the case of the Russell Hill Bridge because if it if it actually collapsed, it might block the water, it might cause floods. Lots of things could happen independent of somebody being able to use them.
What efforts have been made so far to assess the damage or the current state of the bridge other than just the NHDOT?
Well, it says the NHDOT report does go into some of what the specifics of what they've noticed, engineering wise. I think the last time the bridge was inspected with the possibility of perhaps repairing it was 2019. There was a proposal at one point to move the bridge. There was a need to put a bridge downtown, a pedestrian bridge for our river walk. And our economic development team looked at the possibility of taking this significant historic bridge, picking it up off of its abutments in where it is and moving it downtown. They also investigated the potential of simply restoring the bridge on its current location, and in both cases, it was determined from the Economic Development Commission that it wasn't viable from a financial perspective to do that. So that was the last time in 2019 that they actually had bids put out to see what it would cost to restore the bridge. The last time I know, um, we had someone come out, um, a, a bridge engineer, come out and just take a look at the bridge um, in November of 2025 as part of this project of Heritage Commission getting involved, becoming aware of the concerns about the bridge. And, you know, just the engineering was thought to be about $100,000 to $250,000 to do a full engineering study. So a little bit more than the $3,000 that Marjorie paid, and that then doesn't go into the cost to do the bridge repairs itself.
Yeah, I was part of the Echo Dev team, and the other thing about the Pony Bridge is it was too short from where they wanted to put it, and so they would have had to build, essentially, extensions on either side of the bridge, and that would have sort of taken away from the historical maintenance, of the Pony Bridge. It wouldn't be a pony bridge
Right.
anymore.
So it sounds like they decided not to move it for that reason, but also
Yeah.
not restore it either.
Yeah, I think at that time, the issue was where the money was gonna come from.
Right. It came actually to town meeting. I recall being at town meeting and economic development came forth and they asked for money for this project because the Riverwalk has been built, but there is no bridge joining the two sides of the river. And they had actually created a Photoshop of the bridge crossing the river, showing what it would look like. So we could envision it. But the town did not. So it did go to town meeting, but it was not approved.
Where we are currently with that pedestrian bridge is that is actually on the state's, 10-year plan, for funding. It's what's called alternative, transportation, so biking and walking and that sort of thing, and, there's some funding in the state for that, and that bridge, a bridge, across, Stony Creek, which is the stream that goes in front of the police station, um, is funded, um, potentially. I mean, the state could change its mind on what they wanna pay for before things get done. I think it's scheduled for 2030,
Mm.
so what happens between now and 2030 is hard to say. But assuming that that gets done, the state was not interested in moving a historic bridge. They wanna build something that is, engineered from the beginning to be an appropriate pedestrian
Right.
bridge.
This is a very common problem, I think, with a lot of communities with historic bridges, especially the ones that don't carry traffic, because there's no state bridge aid available for bridges that don't carry traffic. And then you end up looking for private funding and grant funding, and everybody's looking for private funding and grant funding. So that makes that very challenging for communities, I think, to pull those resources together. Are there any plans in place, or are we still in the very beginning stages of trying to coordinate efforts to raise some funding for this project?
We just found out at Wilton Heritage Commission was just looped into this um, in March of 2025 when the president of the National Association for Covered Bridges, Bill Caswell, reached out to the town of Wilton saying that he was concerned about this very significant bridge not appearing to be maintained and to be deteriorating. He sent the letter to the town of Wilton. The town of Wilton responded saying, well, this was our town administrator. Thank you for telling us, but we have no plans to do anything about this. But why don't we pass this on to Wilton Heritage? Because our charter, while we have no power and we are in charge of basically, we were chartered by the select board to work on projects like this, which is to say, safeguarding the heritage of this unique cultural heritage of our town through buildings and landscapes.
Mhm.
And this is what we should do. So we started to investigate it. We reached out again to, we were referred to New Hampshire Preservation Alliance, who met with us. And we were given a step by step suggestion on how we could proceed and what we could do. Because I said, what can we do that's not going to cost money?
Mm.
That was my first request. Can we put volunteers on this for certain things, like clearing debris off the bridge? Like they said, please get rotting things off the bridge. And so the fact is, we know that with this bridge, all of the exposed wood is rotted and will have to be replaced. But that's not really the bridge, right? the parts of the bridge that are exposed to the elements are the ones that are designed to be replaced. It's the under parts, the engineering parts that we can't do anything about. But I was given a list of things, which was to consider an initial step of an informal assessment, advisors with appropriate expertise to determine structural soundness, assist with stabilization plans and cost estimates. So we reached out to a bridge. We reached out to a bridge engineer from who specializes in historic bridges. He was very helpful, gave us a lot of information. Um, Talk with the abutters. We talked with the abutters. They came to the meeting. They came to see you speak, Kim, when you came to our event. We found out the main thing that has to be done is basically putting together a fundraising plan, because and that will be involving grants, reaching out to individual donors, getting the word out. I think for me, who lives in Wilton, who is on Heritage and did not know that we had a threatened, extremely rare form of bridge, I didn't know. And so I would say if people in Wilton found out about this, um, and the surrounding community, I think there are funders and there are ways to do this, and there's people who have the knowledge of how to pursue grants that perhaps Heritage ourselves, who don't have experience in this, can't do. So I think making this more well known. We tried to tie it to the semi-quincentennial, which is happening this year. There has been a bridge on that site since the time of the American Revolution. So while this bridge is not dating to that, that crossing has been there since the founding of our country. And so I thought everything we can do to bring this to people's attention, you'll find the people who are interested, and then we'll have a strategy.
And if it gives you any faith, so many of New Hampshire's covered bridges have been saved by exactly this, by community grassroots efforts, pulling together, educating people about the history of the bridge, and pulling together to raise funds, and all different all different grants and private funding. Some communities have partnered with national groups, but it's been the grassroots efforts that have saved our historic bridges, and I am pretty confident that Wilton will do the same.
Yes, I've been talking to people, getting people in other states who have raised money for their projects. I understand that there are grants from LCHIP, there are grants from the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance, there are grants from the National Association of Preservation of Covered Bridges. There are all sorts of things. What it requires, of course, is finding passionate people who are willing to take on this responsibility. And again, I just would say, talking to Kermit, if you've looked at Kermit's um, bio or my bio, we all have a lot of projects that are going on in town. We're very engaged with our town, and we're trying to do a lot of things. And it's hard to find bandwidth to take on these large projects. But I do feel that this is our responsibility as Heritage to take on this unique structure and do what we can. And I'd love to have volunteer days where we get people there on site to learn, and perhaps again find some people with some um, unskilled people and skilled people to do some stabilization. Of course, it's up to the town to make it so it won't fall down when people want to go there and pull out invasive weeds, for example, that are growing onto the surface of the bridge. But I'm so delighted that when we did have a site walk, and when we had you, Kim, come and speak to us at the Wilton Town Hall, we had 2 of our 3 select board members there. Our town administrator was there. Abutters were there. It was really, we had reporters from the cabinet. So it was great that the people who came were all the people who needed to be there.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to ask the town to spend a significant amount of money on this bridge, because there are so many um, bridges that are in active use that need to be repaired, and of course, on the red list, the town pays 20% of the cost. And these days, repairing bridges is a very expensive endeavor.
Yes, it is.
But
Yes, it is.
I think certainly, I believe that there is support in the town you know, for maintaining or keeping this bridge in some shape,
Hmm.
so that it can, because it is a very historic structure.
The location, the idea was, again, when the engineer came out, um, he said, "You don't have to just talk about the grants in relation to the bridge. You can talk about it in relation to the entire historic fabric in which the bridge is placed." So the bridge is there because even though Russell Hill Road now is not a major thoroughfare, it represented the major road that came into Wilton during the 18th century, and it reflects, early industrial history of the area, and there is a lot to be done. Again, it's much as much effort it want as can be put into it is what's gonna happen. So um, I've learned so much, and I'm so grateful again for, like, reading your book, Kim, and for we become an institutional member now of the National Association for the Preservation of Covered Bridges, for the Heritage Commission,
I
because
saw that. That's excellent.
so I'm reading the magazines, I'm learning, um, now I can pick out a town trust or whatever, it's it's one of
Excellent.
the
Good
joys
for you.
of getting engaged. You never know what you're gonna learn.
These things take time and community effort. And it sounds like the town of Wilton has been thinking about ways to save the bridge. But as you mentioned, Kermit, there are so many other bridges that carry traffic that need to be working. So it's really difficult for the town to be committing funding to something that um, isn't carrying traffic.
Yeah, I mean, I was pleased to see that this bridge was substantially documented in the National Covered Bridges Recording Project,
Mhm.
and there's a very detailed article which I think you know you can find at the uh, in the National Archives.
Yes, you
Uh,
can.
the what they call it, the Historic American Engineering Record.
Mhm.
Um, and so it means that people outside of Wilton care about this bridge.
Yes, they do.
Yes. So, in fact, one of my things I wrote a few quotes down, and one of them said, "Further research may show whether the Livermore Bridge is a rare survivor of a once common type or a rare survivor of a rare variant of a common type." And it's like, we're not a rare bridge, right? It's just that there aren't any more left. So it's kind of interesting
Right.
that we're something that was once so ubiquitous, like the passenger pigeon, and now that we have so few of them, we need to take care of them.
Do you have any final thoughts about the old Russell Hill Road or the Livermore Bridge and what it means to you personally?
One of the things that you had asked us about was the what took out the second bridge, and that was the flood of 1936,
Mhm.
and that was a very um, that was a relatively devastating time in Wilton and probably a lot of other places in New Hampshire, um, because it had been a very heavy winter, and then all of a sudden there was a early spring and a lot of rain, maybe 5 inches of rain, and and it was ice that really knocked out the bridge,
Mhm.
because the ice got pushed. The dam, there was a dam in New Ipswich that gave out, and
Oh.
water, a wall of water basically came uh, down in through Greenville and into Wilton, and both the Sauhegan and the Blood Brook were affected by that.
Mm.
And all that ice got, was like a wall of ice that knocked that bridge out. And it also had a big effect on downtown Wilton. I found a really interesting story about there was a boy who was a teenager at the time, and he had a job as kind of a night person at one of the mills, and he talked about how the guys from that mill uh, went out on this broken up ice, and they put 300 pounds of dynamite into the ice, uh, to blow the ice dams out, or otherwise, the town might have been completely inundated. That
Wow.
opened up the channel and let the water, flow.
Well, the flood of 1936 damaged a lot of covered bridges, as you can imagine, in the state. It took out the Hancock Greenfield Bridge. It took the whole bottom of that bridge completely out, and the high water mark in some communities still stands today.
Yeah,
So
we
that was
we
the
have we have a mark on, uh, one of our buildings. One of the older mills in downtown Wilton has a mark for both the, 1936 flood and the 1938, hurricane.
Mhm.
Well, I was gonna say for me, it just, I would say this bridge, which is, just represents a simpler time in Wilton with just a very, nothing fancy, just a hardworking bridge, and, it's just because through some luck that we get to be the town that gets to have it. Um, a lot of towns had them, and now they're gone, so I just feel just because it's nothing fancy doesn't mean it's not worth saving.
Yeah, a lot of these bridges were railroad bridges,
Mhm.
and it made a lot of sense for a railroad bridge because obviously the train didn't wanna go under a roof, uh, but a pony bridge made a lot of sense because you were protecting the lattice without, having a cover over the where the train went. But the train pretty much went away in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
There is very little, active rail in New Hampshire, and so I imagine a lot of those bridges were just allowed to, deteriorate or were just torn down because a lot of those, uh, a lot of those rail lines were taken out. They're
Mhm.
now rail trails,
Right.
and maybe somebody builds a bridge to get across, but it's not a pony bridge.
Right. Right. So how can people get in touch with you to help with your effort to save the old Russell Hill Road Bridge?
Well, I would say reaching out to the Heritage Commission because I would say we're going to be, if people express interest, um, that would be great. I said we are a very active Heritage Commission, and we're very excited.
Mhm.
We're not just calling it in, and there's just, but we want to meet the people who are interested in this topic, and want to, help make this happen.
And we know there are bridge aficionados out there, and hopefully some of them will come out and give us advice and maybe give us support.
Well, thank you both for talking to me today. I expect a follow-up episode in a year or two, or however long it takes to see what has come of the old Russell Hill Road Bridge. So thank you both so much for talking to me today. The Covered Bridges of New Hampshire podcast is created and hosted by me and recorded in Hancock, New Hampshire. The song Old New Hampshire was arranged and performed by Josh Black. Our introduction is courtesy of Greg Kretschmar. This podcast is a companion to my book, Covered Bridges of New Hampshire. You can learn more about the book, explore blog posts, view covered bridge videos and photographs, check event listings, and access an interactive covered bridge map at coveredbridgesnh.com. Follow Covered Bridges of New Hampshire on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for additional content and updates. If you enjoy the podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Kim Chandler. Thank you for listening.